Hi and welcome back. This is Gmax 1.2 for the beginning modeler video number 38, the topic of which is preparation for texture mapping, part 2. You may recall in the previous video we talked about the introduction to texture mapping, what kinds of mapping we'll be using. We talked about using planar mapping or cylindrical mapping, and we answered some fundamental questions. What is texture mapping? What are UVW coordinates? What are texture sheets? And the implications of mapping 3D objects to a 2D texture sheet. Very interesting stuff. We also talked about texture sheet sizes for flight sim and what the limitations are and the options are. 2048, basically by 2048 for the texture artist, but in Flight Sim 9 or 2004, 1024 by 1024 is a maximum size, but any size that is a power of 2 and large enough is acceptable. For example, 1024 by 1024, 512 by 512, 256 by 256, or some combination of those numbers like 1024 by 512. And we also talked about resolution considerations for the texture sheets and the importance, at least to the painter, of mapping these to a size that is consistent throughout the aircraft. For example, the major exterior body panels, the fuselage, the wings, the tails, etc., to make it easier on the texture artist or painter. So that's what we covered last time. So we have a basic introduction to texture mapping. The next thing I want to talk about is the preparation for texture mapping. And what we need here is a structured, organized approach to map every single poly that's in the viewport here to a texture sheet, and we want that process to be repeatable. In other words, if I come back later and need to make a change, I want to be able to know that, or be able to go and select one side of this these sets of objects here and know that I did it just the way I mapped it originally. So there is a process of going through these selections to make selection easy and error-free, and to, once you make those selections, to bake them into the model, bake them in through Gmax to the model, and to be able to come back and repeat those selections without error so that you can make adjustments or corrections. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In the way we, let's go back to the top and kind of a 50,000 foot view here for a second. How do we get from what we see here to what we see in the sim with the texture maps applied? How do we get, what's the steps to get from here to there? And that's the first step of which we're going to talk about today. The next step will be the actual generation of the UVW maps and the application to the model parts. So in this video, we're going to talk about mapping this fuselage part set group. And there are these parts in the fuselage, the gear doors, the cannon pods that are showing up here on the nose, and the gun pods, the passenger entry and exit door, which is right here, and the nose gear doors, and then the wheel wells and the entry-exit sidewall areas. So that's what we're going to attempt to do, and the question becomes, well, just how big is the task? Well, if you do a selection of all the polys in the scene here, you'll see over here to the right in the drop-down command panel, there are 3,945 faces selected. And every one of those faces has to be selected properly and applied to a selection group properly, so that we can generate this representation of all the polys in the scene on a texture sheet. This outline border here represents the texture sheet. So once we do all these selections properly, we can export it, and this will demonstrate where we have placed them on the texture sheet. Okay. Now, when we talk about process, how are we going to do these selections to break these polys out like this on this texture sheet? Well, we talked about the implications of mapping yesterday, or in the previous video, a 3D object like this to a flat texture sheet. And what happens when you get up in the area where your angles are like 45 degrees or more, when I'm looking and applying a texture from the side, what happens up here on these angles, where you get a few pixels stretched over a longer distance than you intend, or that would happen down here on the side. So we have to avoid that, and we talked about we would actually map this on 4 sides: left, right, top, bottom. So the question then becomes, well, how do you go about doing that, and how can you repeat that process if you had to make adjustments or whatever? Well, you do need a process. And what I generally do on a fuselage is map it 4 sides. This is the right side of the fuselage. This is the left side. This is the bottom. This is the top. And these are those interior walls, the gear bays, and the entry-exit door sidewalls. So what we have to do is break these out into selection groups, or material IDs, as Gmax calls them. And that process has to be managed. So what I've decided to do, and what I usually do, is say, okay, my left side I'm going to call selection group 1. My right side is going to be 2. My top side is going to be a 3. My bottom side is going to be a 4. My nose cap is going to be a 5. My engine exit area in the back of the fuselage here is going to be a 6. And then I'll apply a 7, 8, and 9 to the other areas. So once I'm all done, I can go in at any time and select any one of these groups and highlight those polys that were selected when I set them up. So that's the approach we're going to use. Essentially, we're going to show you how to go through a selection process that is generally error-free, and we show you techniques to validate and verify your selections and ensure you don't have rogue selections on the opposite side or what have you. So we're going to try to show you an easy process to start out with a very general selection, and we'll start picking that apart and getting down to brass tacks when we have to get down to smaller areas. And when it's all said and done, you'll end up with a likely an error-free selection process that gives you 9 IDs on this particular example, and demonstrates that you have included every single one of those 3,945 polys, and you'll do that relatively quickly. Now, if I weren't stopping and explaining as I do this, I could map this series of parts in about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, it's going to take longer than that because of the video and the explanations. But what I will probably do along the way at some point, once I show you the basic processes a couple times, is pause the video, finish up the selection, or I'll flip to another scene where I've already gone through and done all the selections, so we can prepare to move on to the next steps. So with that rather long 10-minute introduction, why don't we get started? Okay, first off, I explained in the previous video that when you're mapping something like this, it makes a lot of sense when you're going to map the fuselage to include the attached parts, so you don't have to do those separately and try to squeeze them in. You'd like them to be in their proper position in the fuselage to make it easy on your texture artist or painter. Otherwise, he's going to have to try to blend colors from what he used here on the fuselage into the doors, which you may have placed elsewhere on the texture sheet. So what I always do is try to fill all the holes with these doors where they belong and just map them right along with the fuselage. And since these are not removable parts, these gun pods, cannon pods, I'm mapping them right along as part of the fuselage. So essentially, when I map these, I want to treat this all as one object. Okay, so how do I do that? When you have multiple objects, how do you go about going through this selection process and assigning selection IDs or group IDs to all the parts at the same time when they're disparate parts? Well, it's simple. You use an edit mesh, and you'll find that right here on your drop down panel. First, you have to go into modify mode. Once you select these parts, go into your modify mode, and you'll have nothing here, so you just drop down, pick up your edit mesh, and add it to the stack for all of these parts, and that becomes part of the individual parts stack. You'll see that edit mesh on each individual part. And once you have that and go into poly mode, you can then select polys from all the various parts as if it were one part. So this makes it easy to do the material ID assignments, as you will see here. So that's the game plan, essentially. We're going to go through the process of selecting the various sides and assign a material ID to each of those selections. And when we're all done, we'll have 9 selections, and we will have all 3,945 faces accounted for. And as I said, once you get good at this, you can knock out something like this. Even though you have that many faces selected, you can knock out something like this in 15 or 20 minutes. And some are more complicated than others when there's faces that are hidden, like behind flaps and that kind of thing. And but you learn how to deal with that. It's not a big deal. It's not a big issue. So what I want to do, and the technique I usually use, is I want to be sure I select all the polys in this scene, and I've got 3,945, and then I'm going to give them, I want to assign to them a material ID that I'm not going to use, 1 through 9, so we'll just give it a 10. So every one of these polys now, if you selected a single one, is going to have a material ID of a 10, no matter where it is in the scene. Everything's a 10 now. Well, by the time we get done, everything is going to be something other than a 10. And the reason I use this technique is once I go through all the assignments and I think I'm done, I can go back and select material ID 10, and this number should be 0 when I'm done. If I have followed the process correctly and selected and assigned everything to the groups they should be assigned to, I should have no more 10s. Then I know I have been successful. Now, there's another way to know too when you actually go and map this and export it, but that's the next video. If you have left out a single poly, you'll see lines running around, random lines running around. They're not really random. They actually link to the poly that you missed in whatever part it was. And you can pretty easily figure it out by going down the list here and seeing which one is showing you that part that has the poly that's not mapped. And when you find it, you'll see those lines running around that part. And then you can go look at that part and figure out which poly you overlooked. And usually it's something really small and tiny and you don't see from 20 feet. So that's kind of what that's all about. All right, let's see. Expand. Okay, now we're back. Okay, so that's where we are. With that said, let's try to get started here. So first of all, I'm going to right click and make sure we're in select and do no damage mode here, and clear that selection. Go to let's go to the top view. We're going to start out with the right side of the fuselage, and there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it from the front view if you'd like, maybe just as easy because you're in closer. And what we're going to do is ensure that Ignore Backfacing is off, because we want to select everything that we can see plus everything on the back side. So we're just going to select everything with the region select here. Everything, and get up as close to that center line as you can. Everything on the right side of the aircraft. Look at it from the rear. That's the right side of the aircraft. And make sure that we've got everything selected. Now that looks good. Looks pretty good. Now we've got some things included in here that's later going to be changed to other selection groups, but that's okay for now. We're kind of doing a gross separation. We're kind of breaking this down as if you're doing a binary search, kind of breaking it down, you know, taking one half and then the other half, and we'll start out with selections 1 and 2. So that's what we're going to do here. Now another way to look at this, if you look at, you can look at it like this without the shading on by hitting F2, turn the shading back on. Most of the time we'll use shading. And then you can also look at it in wireframe mode by pressing F3. And by doing that, it kind of unhides selections inside the aircraft that you don't see in this mode. So that's why you want to use wireframe. And I use wireframe most of the time. Sometimes when you get in to doing internal things like inside the cockpit or wheel wells, you'll want to go back to the smoothing skinned mode. But it looks like we've achieved here what we wanted to achieve. We look at it from the top, that looks good. If you look at it from the bottom with the V key, that looks good. From the rear, it's hard to tell because we've got this. We can obviously pull that off. It doesn't matter. It's going to get reassigned later anyhow, but don't worry about that. That's an internal part right there. We just deselected, but it hasn't affected to the front view. It hasn't affected our right side selection, so we know we're good to go. We've got the right side selected, so while we're right there, let's go ahead and change that ID from a 10. That's part of the 10 group that we started out with. Let's change that to a 1. And you press 1 on the keyboard and press enter. Okay, that group is now, let's select 10 just to show you. Notice all that right side is no longer a part of 10. Alright, so let's go back and select group 1. There's our right side in group 1. Now group 2 is easy because it's just going to be the flip of that. So let's just edit and select invert. And now we've got exactly all of the polys that weren't selected before. And we're going to call that group 2. That's the left side. Press enter. Give it a 2 and press enter. So now, theoretically, there should be no 10s left. If we did that correctly, there should be no 10s left. So let's just check. No faces selected. So we already know that we've accounted for every poly in the scene this early in the game. So pretty good, huh? So now that we have right side and left side selected and assigned, selection groups 1 and 2, we have to do the top. The top. So let's go to the front view, and let's go to the skin view so it's a little less confusing to look at. And we've got now to decide, and in this case, let's turn on Ignore Backfacing, because I only want to select what I can see here. What I'm trying to do is find where's my breaking point between side and top and bottom. So here's the 45-degree line. So I'm going to stop right here for my side selections, and I'm going to start here. So I'm going to select a couple of these. Alright, and I'm going to, so that's from the center line, it's 1, 2, 3. So I've got 3 rows of polys here on either side. Okay, that's going to be a part of the top. So now let's go to a side view. Right side is fine. And turn off Ignore Backfacing, because now we're going to select all these top polys. So let's just prepare to do that. Go up to Select and Do No Harm, and we're just going to start selecting down to the ones we just highlighted. So now we know the row we're in, so we're just going to kind of go to each. The reason I'm repeating or doing the overlap here is to ensure that if there's any small polys that I'm not seeing here, then I'm picking them up as well. We're going to come down to here. This front nose cap is going to be assigned a different group, so we don't have to worry about that right now. So let's just continue the process back here by holding down the Alt key and adding to our selections. A lot of times in here you'll notice I'll need to pick that up. If you go beyond that, that's okay. You can just come down here to the bottom and hold down your Alt key and go undo that part of the selection, so you know you got all those little polys in there taken care of. So let's go continue the process back here. You can grab a whole bunch of them on a straight line like this. Oops. And we're cooking. So now we have what appears to be a decent start on the selection for the top, which we'll call ID number 3. Now let's go take a look at wireframe mode, just to make sure we haven't selected something we didn't want. We have the cockpit selections in here, and that's going to be changed later, but it's okay to leave that for now. Or, you can take it off if it bothers you. Hold down the Alt key and go up and pull that off. Just make sure you do that in an angle. You're not deselecting on the other side things that you have selected. So if you look all around, same deal up here. These actually are going to be assigned to number 6 group, so we're good to go. So on the top, this is the floor of the cockpit, so you don't have to worry about that. On the top, we look good, so let's go ahead and give that a 3. Assign that a 3. 3 and press enter. So those are now 3s. Now if you wanted to kind of verify, 3s, you have to be very careful messing with these. So material IDs, don't get it confused with select by. You can't select here. You can only assign here. Here is where you select. If you mess up and try to select here, you'll actually change the assignment. So be very careful when you're in that arena. So let's go to select mode and just go to the rear. And let's just kind of verify now that we did this separation of 1 and 3 correctly. Let's go down and select number 1. And what we want to watch is this line right here to see that selection group 1 matches up with what we've got selected for 3. And you can see it does. So we've done good there. 3. Okay. Now let's try the same thing with 2. Let's make sure that Selection group 2 matches up with selection group 3 line, and it does. So we're good to go there. So we've got selections 1, 2, and 3. Now we'll do the bottom. Getting the hang of it here, guys, gals. Alright, so let's just kind of unselect everything there. Let's go back with an F3 to the skin mode here. And as we're kind of setting up our guideline, let's go to Ignore Backfacing. So we had 3 up here, and we'll probably do 3 here, yes. So we're going to be in selecting these polys on either side. 3 on either side of center line. So we go back to right side. Alright, and here we got okay, they're all covered. No problem. So, go turn Ignore Backfacing off. These parts of the processes are important, so we're in Select and Do No Harm, so we're good to go there. So we're going to start here, come up there and pick up them. Notice this red line here. This is the front side of the gear bay, but you can ignore that for now. We're going to reassign that later. We're just going to come up and pick up the rest of this bottom up to there. Let's just carry this on back to here and here. This is a very vertical side, so we want to leave that assigned to the sides, not to the bottom, as we're doing this bottom selection here. Okay, that looks good from that side. Let's go to the left side, make sure we haven't missed anything. Looks good. Looks good. Let's look at it from the front. Everything looks good. We're beyond the 45 here. We've just got the things that ought to be on the bottom. Alright, that looks good. Let's go to the back with the F key. And everything looks good. We got some polys here that's going to be assigned to the number 6 group, so we don't worry about that right now. So we look good there, so we can go ahead and name that to 1, 2, 3, 4. This is ID number 4. So give it a 4 and press enter, and those are assigned. Okay, so we've got the bulk of the polys in this already done here in just a few minutes. So let's go pick up the nose section now. Nose cap. Clear that selection and come in and pick up the nose cap. Let's go to the left of the L key. Make sure we've got the K. Make sure we've got all those polys done, selected. We'll call that a 5. Alright, now let's go clear that and let's go to the rear with the F key. And we're going to we need to change this to Ignore Backfacing. This one gets a little more difficult because of what we've got to deal with here. I need to select all these internal ones, but I don't want to be selecting these external ones. So we have to kind of get on an angle to this and do the selection with Ignore Backfacing on, and you can hold down the Control key and come in and pick up. You can actually do these two because these are going to be a part of that group. There. This is a little hard to zoom around because it zooms on the whole deal, not just on the things selected. We can go pick up these. You just have to keep zooming and hitting the E key to zoom back in, or keep rotating and hitting the zoom key to come back in. So rotate and hit the E key. Hit the E key. Alright, now we can come down and pick up these. Alrighty. It's not uncommon to get some rogue selections. You just need to double check it and make sure that you that you correct that before you assign your group ID to it. Alright, we just about have it, I think. Got something here. Where does that belong? Oh, that's the underside of the fuselage, which is going to stay with the left and right. So looks like we've got everything all the way around the inside there and all the way around the inside there and the faces. So that looks good. Now let's go to make sure we haven't done any rogue selections up and down the sides anywhere. Make sure that's clean. That's good. So now we can do assign those to 6. We're doing good on size of this video so far, so we can continue. So 6 is done. Now we're down to the cockpit. Let's go do that. Here's a time when we want to hit the F3 key and go to the skin mode. It kind of makes it easier to see what we're doing here. Let's select off the old selection and come in clean. So now we just need to walk around the fuselage walls and select all of these polys. A little hard to do a group selection or region selection on these because of the nature of it. We're just holding down the control key and clicking away here. Let's see what else we got left over here. I think we have this done. Alright, that looks good there. Let's go back to wireframe and see we accidentally picked up any other polys anywhere. Yes, we did down here. So we'll hold down the Alt key and deselect that. That's why you do those checks. So you want to make sure you got your selections good. That looks good. So this is going to be ID number 7. We'll come down and give this a 7 and press enter. Alright, so now let's go do the Ignore Backfacing is on still, so we're going to clear that selection and go after the nose gear section. I'm trying to rush this, folks. Probably shouldn't have to. I think you're getting the point, so it's just a matter of go back to skin mode with F3 here, so we can know that we're seeing the inside and not something else. So I think what I'm going to do is pause this video now and finish up these selections just to keep this short. You got the idea of how we're going through and doing these assignments and managing the selection process. So I think I'll pause the video, bring in the other one I just completed, and so forth. Some of these you have to zoom in to make sure you got. Oops. There's a tough one to select because I had 2 facing me and I'm on Ignore Backfacing, but we got a couple front panels here. We may have that. Oh, there's another one. Okay. That bad boy may be done. Okay, let's go to F3 and look at the wireframe mode and see if we've messed up anything in the process. See if we selected what we wanted to select. Looks like it. Nothing back in the back. We've messed up. So there we have ready to assign to number 8. Alright. The last thing is number 9 is the back to F3. So let's clear the selection and go pick up. I guess things are going pretty well here, so I may as well just wrap it up, finish up the selection. I still have the rear to do. Is this 9? Yeah, I did that. Okay. Talking to myself here, folks. We're cranking. Alright, are we good to go on this one? Nope, got the front side. Alright, so boom, boom, boom. Now maybe we got it. Let's go to F3, turn off the skin so we can kind of see everything inside and out. Make sure we have everything, and it looks like we do. So we're ready to assign that to number 9. That should be it, boys and girls. That should be it. We should have F3 here. Let's close those doors. If everything is good, we are now ready to start applying edit polys and UVW maps to get the maps done so we can export and generate textures to apply to this aircraft. So what we've done here is, didn't want to do that. What we've done here is now selected 3,945 polys and assign them selection groups. Material IDs, I think is what it calls it down here. Selecting by ID, I guess they're material IDs. And we've broken this up so that now we can actually do the mapping and export it. And hopefully this is what we'll see on the other side after we get that process done. So go back and review this and make sure and practice with the ways I've shown you to do the selections, and verifying by looking at wireframe views as well as skin views, using shaded faces and so forth, and practice with that. I think you'll see that it's going to come easy, and you can see how error-free it can make the process. And once those assignments are made, they're baked into the model, so it's easy to go back anytime and do a selection. Selected one on the other side, can't see it. And you'll see that it will save you a lot of time going forward, not having to go back each time you want to do something and reselect all the polys, and hopefully you did it this time the way you did it last time. So now these are all baked in, and we are good to go. So next video we'll be focusing on actually doing the mapping. Yay! Time to get some textures on this bad boy and get those texture artists and painters fired up about painting this aircraft. So I hope this was instructional, and I look forward to showing you how to do the mapping in the next part. Have a good day, folks. Thanks for joining.